You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Worldwide toll-free, 800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and our main website where you can listen to the X-Zone Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern until midnight, or the rest of the time, the best of the X-Zone shows with our compliments at www.xzoneradiotv.com. It is Wednesday, October the 28th in the year 2015, and let me see, today is another Republican debate, I believe. It's going to be very interesting to see how Donald Trump fares out against the poll leader now, Dr. Ben Carson. And it's also going to be very interesting to see what happens at the end of the night, to see who drops out of the race as far as the Republicans are concerned. You know, Exo Nation, I've been doing this show now for 25 years. And over the years, there have been books and authors who have come and go. But there's also been books and authors who strike a chord, and you know when you talk to the author, you know when you read the book, that it comes from the heart, and that the author wants to make positive changes and share information with you, information that makes it a better day, a better week, a better month, a better year, and a better life. This is the case of my guest this hour. Roberta Grimes is my special guest. She is the author of Liberating Jesus. And Roberta Grimes spent decades studying nearly 200 years of afterlife evidence and forming a detailed picture of what happens to us at the end and after death. She then discovered that 2,000 years ago, Jesus told us things about God, reality, death, the afterlife, human nature, and the meaning and the purpose of our lives that perfectly match the afterlife evidence in even small details. She outlines many of these correspondences and appendices of her books, The Fun of Dying and The Fun of Staying in Touch. Now, in Liberating Jesus, Roberta offers compelling evidence that the earliest Christians misunderstood the meaning and the messages of Jesus. Roberta demonstrates that all the correspondences between the Gospels and the afterlife evidence amount to nothing less than a new revelation from God. And she shows us that once we put aside the magic thinking notion that the whole Christian Bible must be the inspired Word of God just because the earliest Christians said it was, we are at least free. We're free to bring Jesus to humankind, the messages directly from God that long ago were His life's true purpose. His promise remains as fresh today as it was 2,000 years ago, and now it is confirmed by the afterlife evidence. If we live according to the Lord's teaching, we can bring the kingdom of God on earth. Joining me now is Roberta Grimes. And Roberta, welcome back to the X-Zone.
Oh, Rob, I'm so glad to be with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You know, I've read your book. I can feel the honesty. I can feel the love in your book, in your words, in your writing. And all I can say is thank you for writing this book.
Oh, thank you. It was hard. It was hard to say these things. It's always hard to to look at the apple cart and just say, I'm just going to turn it over. There's no way to save it. It's hard.
But it needed to be done.
I guess it did. Apparently so, because it's hitting quite a chord with a lot of people.
Yeah. And I can understand why. For example, in your introduction, if I just might read the first paragraph, when I was 8 years old, I had a spiritual experience that led me to spend a half-century studying nearly 200 years of afterlife evidence. There is so much of this evidence of so many kinds, and it is so entirely consistent, that eventually I was able to make sense of what is a gigantic picture. In 2010, I published The Fun of Dying, Find Out What Really Happens Next. Soon I was meeting others who also had undertaken this research, and I found my wonderment that all of us had arrived at the same complex and beautiful conclusions. The study of death and the afterlife is robust science, as real and objective as any other science. This is the century in which it is going to enrich every beautiful human life. Wow.
You know, Rob, you're going to have to start calling what you do not paranormal, but normal. Has that occurred to you?
Yeah, but you see, to me, this is normal. It's to the new listeners that we bring into the X Zone Nation that we say, because to them it is paranormal.
I know, until they learn.
Because of you see, I look at my radio show as a school, and my guests are teachers. My listeners are students.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. All of us are both students and teachers. I think we're all trying to understand more perfectly what's going on, but at the same time, it's not for us we're doing it. It's because the world so desperately needs this information and needs it now.
What is that saying? When the student is ready, the teacher will come?
Yes. Yes.
And I think that what that means is that when we're ready to accept the possibility of what we did not believe in or what we do not believe in, that this is when the teacher comes. And I believe that in this very day and time in our society, that a lot of people are looking around and saying, oh my God, what in the name of Sam Hell did we do?
Yes. Yes. And anyone who's older has lived through normality into whatever this is now and certainly can perceive the difference. And that's very disturbing for me. I mean, we're literally watching our civilization fall apart. And why? And I think at the core of it is the fact that we have lost our anchor in spirituality, which we always did have, I think, before, but we don't have now.
Yeah. Why do you think we lost our anchor with spirituality?
I think the problem is that Western societies have had things too good. Everything has been just handed to us. We take it all for granted. Certainly in the United States we do. I think Canadians may be purer in their thinking.
Whoa. No, I'm going to tell you something. We're just as weird, wacky, and bizarre as any other nation.
I don't know. You look pretty normal to me. But the problem is, if we take for granted what we have, we are going to lose it, and we're losing it now. And there's a bigger problem, which I talk about in Liberating Jesus, and that's that we are ready for an explosion in consciousness, for a leap forward in spiritual growth. And in order to do that, we really have to reclaim a kind of basic connection with spirituality. And then we have to, sadly, throw off the things which were crutches before for our spirituality and try to connect directly with spirit. And that's what Jesus tried to do 2,000 years ago. If you read the Gospels, you know that's true. It just didn't work the first time. Now, this time, it has to work.
I think another part of the problem was that 2,000 years ago, when the words were written, humanity and society was totally different. For example, we didn't have the knowledge of science, the knowledge of physics, biology, astrology, and all the wonderment that we have today. So in those days, it was explained as the masses could best understand. Unfortunately, throughout the years, the writings stayed the same. The message stayed the same. It did not grow with society.
Yes, that's so true.
Yeah. And this is why I'm glad you're here to put the wording into everyday 2015 language that the message now can be learned once again and brought back once again.
What happened was that Jesus, and I think the evidence is very strong that Jesus actually was God on earth. I don't think we need to quibble about that. Sure. Yes, Jesus was God on earth, come to tell us how to make the next leap in our understanding. Now that the Jews, the first real true monotheists, had determined that there's one God, one powerful God. They weren't quite ready to understand that God was spirit, but they'd made a big leap forward. So God came to say, okay, now here's how you fix the mess which you have made with free will. I mean, we can choose to be good. We can choose to be bad. Unfortunately, too many people are choosing to be bad. You're not making progress here, guys. Here's the teaching that will solve it. That's what the Gospels really are. But the problem is, then he died. And it was a tragedy for the first century Jews who had believed he was their Messiah. So you got a lemon, what do? You make lemonade.
Exactly.
And that's what they did. They created a first century Jewish sect around the Gospels. But they basically packaged the Gospels in this Jewish sect. The teachings of the Gospels are not even really mentioned in the rest of the New Testament. It's sort of like a case was put around it of around the Gospels of a set of first century beliefs, which we now know from the afterlife evidence have no basis in reality at all.
The afterlife evidence that you say is irrefutable, can you share that with our listeners?
Well, the way I started, I suppose there are a number of ways you can do this, but I started by reading communications from the dead received primarily through deep trance mediums in the latter part of the 19th, first half of the 20th century. And we have a lot of that stuff because right at that sort of juncture, there was an active attempt by teams of the dead to show us that they were alive and were fine. I think it was meant to coincide with the discovery of quantum mechanics. I think basically the awareness we're developing now was supposed to have begun 100 years ago, but it was ignored by scientists. They wouldn't touch it with a 100-foot pole. So the researchers ended up leaving the books of all of this wonderful evidence on dusty shelves. But the thing that's significant, Rob, is not that we have some people who claimed that they were dead speaking through mediums. What's significant is we have hundreds and hundreds of these, which were researched by people who thought they were doing very serious science. These were scholars, and they're all the same. Yeah. They're all talking about the same physics, the same process, the same, way people, dress, live, work, do things. Everything about it is the same, and that's not possible if it's not real. You couldn't have only correspondences and no outliers if it were not real.
It's surreal that there are still people in today's society who believe that we're here, we die, that's all there is to it.
Yes. Yes.
And after having done this show for so many years and having had the pleasure of speaking to guests like yourself and other guests who have done honest, hardworking research into the afterlife using logic and science, all this evidence, and it is hardcore evidence. We're not talking about evidence of UFOs, evidence of Bigfoot, evidence of ghosts. We're talking about hardcore evidence that is backed by science.
That's right.
And still they say, oh no, you're dead, you're gone, that's it.
Yeah, I sort of started there, but once I had assembled this very detailed picture, and you can make a very detailed picture if you spend a couple decades reading these communications, even as a hobby, then I discovered that it fits perfectly with quantum mechanics. In fact, the principles of quantum mechanics kind of explain some things that otherwise would make no sense about the afterlife. I've come to understand that quantum mechanics is a kind of plug that connects the material physics, the Newtonian physics that only operates here and less than 5% of what we know exists, with most of reality where the consciousness where the physics is entirely consciousness-based. But you see how it all fits together? There are so many insights scientists have which we can use in studying the afterlife. It's all one science. They just ignore this part of it.
Because it suits their purpose.
That's right. They're scared of it, Rob.
Of course.
How could you be afraid to discover that suddenly we've always known that our lives are eternal, our minds are part of eternal mind? It's all such beautiful news. I cannot imagine why they don't want to even investigate it at all.
You know, there are certain members of the media who, using their skills as film directors, as creators, as writers, who have tried their very best to give the message to the masses using science fiction. For example, Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek. You know, the Borg, the collective, we're all together. We're all part of one.
Yes.
You know, the message is there. So here you've got people like Gene Roddenberry, a great man, a great loss to humanity. Steven Spielberg does the same, and all these people in Hollywood who are trying to get a message across as best they can. You go to the show, you pay your $163,000 now I think it is to go to a show with candies and everything else. Just kidding, but you go to the show.
It only seems that way, doesn't it?
It does. You know, and you watch it, and I watch it, and I look at it one way. No, because I'm into this, and I'm a believer. The evidence is too strong to say it's a bunch of hooey. Anyway,
right.
And I get the message. I think I get the message that the film is trying to portray, because an author is no different than a director. You're both trying to get a message across. And you hear the people saying, "Wow, geez, too bad it wasn't real," or "Geez, where's this guy? Is he on cloud nine? Is he trying to get things done with psychotropic drugs?" They have no concept, and it's when they say, "Why isn't this real?" I feel like stopping, grabbing them by the shoulders, and shaking them, saying, "It is real. It is
real." Right, right.
Oh, but it's nice to see. It's nice to see society starting to take this very seriously. Like years ago, afterlife, near death, it was woo-woo, even to my audience. But now, I'll tell you, in the last 10 years, there's been a shift.
It's been extraordinary, hasn't it? I've seen it happening too.
It has.
Even in the last 5. When I first published in 2010, The Fun of Dying, and I did a lot of traveling and talking about the book, I would be looking out over seas of blank faces, and people would look confused, and they'd ask foolish questions afterwards during the question time. Yeah. Just 3 or 4 years later, maybe even 2. I think 2012 actually was. It's hard to say, but I think that was when it started. I would be talking before different group, different day, but the same kind of people. They'd be smiling, they'd be nodding, great questions. I'm sure it's happening with you on your shows. So, it must be amazing, the difference.
It is. And even when I go out to do lectures or guest speaker at any of the service clubs or at a school, the kids are really interested.
Yes.
I can't believe kids, they're right into this.
Yes.
And they'll say, they don't want to talk about ghosts. They don't want to talk about UFOs. What they want to talk about are wormholes, quantum physics, life after death.
My goodness.
Life after death.
Isn't that great?
And when you look back in history, the Celts believed in this. They would lend people money going into battle because they knew that if they were killed during battle, they'd come back and get the money that they lent this person.
That is really freaky.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just so wonderful. But now that we can put it into perspective with our knowledge of science, our knowledge of the universe that we're slowly growing to understand, it makes perfect sense.
It does. And this is being orchestrated, actually, and far above our pay grade. It appears that what's happening is that for the past 20 to 25 years, there's been an effort underway to raise the consciousness of all the people on the planet. I mean, now when surveys are done, people say they're less religious, they're more spiritual. Right. I mean, our minds are really being opened, but I think it's each person's spirit guides working on his or her mind that's doing that. I'm not sure. It's like it's in the air. It's like a virus. It's infecting everyone in a really healthy way.
A question I like asking people who are theologists who come on the show is, how different would the Bible be if it was written for the very first time today?
Oh, I can tell you.
Tell me.
It would be Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. If one of the problems Christians have, and it's a serious one, is that nobody I have ever known who was a Christian, and I was a major Christian most of my life, takes the Gospels seriously. They're meant to be taken literally. And if you read the Gospels, you find that Jesus meant for us to throw away the whole Old Testament right at the start.
Yeah.
He never meant it to be incorporated into any spiritual book. And the rest of course, the New Testament, other than the four Gospels, is just packaging which St. Paul put together so that he could preserve the Gospels. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Christian martyrs, that now we have those teachings. But Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is the whole inspired Word of God. That's the only part of the Bible that should still be Bible. Period. You can tell that about. Yeah. Rob, I get so excited I can hardly speak. You could tell that by reading the Gospels, but people don't read them.
It's two complete theologies. The God of the early Bible, of the Old Testament, is mean. He's vengeful. I wouldn't, like I've said this many a times, God is the worst father going.
Yes.
He
enjoy watching his son murdered, so he'll feel better about the fact that the other kids messed up the living room.
Exactly.
I mean, think about it.
Oh, sure. Well, look at Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yes. I mean, the whole thing is awful.
And then the story of Noah. Well, it makes no blooming sense. No. It's a great metaphor.
The God of the Old Testament, Jehovah, is nothing like the genuine God. One of the things that comes from studying the afterlife is you find that the genuine God, there really is a God. God really exists. In fact, God is the only thing that actually exists. But that God is nothing like what the Jews or the Christians believe in, because he's got no negative, no human failings at all.
But you know what? If we go back to the book of Genesis, where it says, and God said, let us, plural, create man in our image, plural, in our likeness. So if that is the case, and if all of these people who really believe everything in the Bible, to me, and I got thrown out of church because of my attitude.
I'm not surprised.
It was, if I am created in God's image and his likeness, then I am a God.
Yes.
Well, and the Reverend says, whoa, you're the son of the devil. Don't come back.
Oh, my.
Do you know any other kid who at the age of 9, mother receives a call from your pastor minister, your parish minister, saying that your son is no longer welcomed in church because he is the son of the devil because he asks too many questions?
Are you serious?
Oh.
That was what they did?
Well, this is the God's truth of the New Testament. Okay, the God's truth. Yeah.
Lord. Out of the mouths of babes, actually. They should have celebrated you, not thrown you out.
Oh, listen, I saw how they celebrated Jesus. I'm glad they threw me out.
Right. Oh, that's true. No, the thing that people don't understand is that the whole Bible cannot possibly be the inspired Word of God. And I know that because I've read it through repeatedly.
Yes.
I used to say I've read it a dozen times. I know I've read it at least a half a dozen times because for years, that's what I would do.
Well, even if you read it half a dozen times, there's 2 books, so there you go. You've read it a dozen times.
Right. But the thing is, if you read it, there's so many inconsistencies. I mean, rank inconsistencies. That if that's the inspired Word of God, what did God keep changing? Or is God eternal? God's eternal. Well, then it could not possibly be the inspired word of an eternally consistent, rational God, and certainly not of a loving God. So it's not the inspired word of God. You can tell by just reading it.
Over the years, I have asked one question, and nobody can answer it. Hopefully you might be able to answer it or lead me to the answers that it must be somewhere. If, as I was saying, that in the beginning God said, let us create man in our image, who are the us? Who are the our? Because if Adam and Eve were the first created, why is he talking before creation? And if he's talking before creation, who else was he talking about?
I've got two answers for you, actually. The first answer is that the Bible was put together from a lot of different stories, and those stories themselves are not consistent with one another.
Right.
And, I majored in religion in college. That's how deeply religious I was, and specialized in early Christian education, and that question came up. And that's the answer we were given then. But I'll give you a playful answer.
I'd like the answer from Roberta Grimes.
Well, here's another playful answer.
Okay.
The asteroid belt, reportedly, and we learned this from sort of anecdotal stuff from dead people, was once a planet, which peaceful, loving planet destroyed itself because it was trying to get energy out of its core, and it blew up, and now it's an asteroid belt. However, the reason we know about it is that the afterlife of that planet still exists, and it's very beautiful, and the people are lovely. And when we first die, we travel quite a bit. And one of the places you go is, you might go to China, you might go to Marduk's afterlife. It's quite beautiful. The Mardukians, and I don't know why that's what it's called, but that's what it's called, had established colonies on Mars and on Earth. And when the colony on Earth, and this is the story, I don't know if it's true, when the colony on Earth lost contact with its mother planet because the planet had blown up, what could they do? They worked out how to hybridize themselves with the indigenous animals, which were proto-human. And therefore, every time you look in the mirror, you're looking at a part Mardukian individual. If that's the case, then maybe the people talking were Mardukians. Let's make them in our image, looking at the proto-humans who were all around them. Yeah. And lo and behold, that's what they did. How's that for playful?
I like that. Here's what I suggested once was, let's rewrite the Bible. And I would love to rewrite the book of Genesis, because I would start with space, the final frontier.
Yes.
These are the voyages of the SS Noah's Ark. You see, in my Bible, Noah...
You could do it as a comic book even,
Noah and his family are space travelers. And what they have in the Ark are not animals 2x2, DNA of male and female species. They come to this planet and they propagate it. Now, because we don't.
Why not?
We don't have any evidence of a worldwide flood. We know that would never happen. We know that he could not have taken every animal 2x2.
These are folk stories, and most of the folk stories that are in the Old Testament, or many of them, we can find their origins in much earlier tales from related civilizations.
In fact, Noah's Ark comes from the Babylonians.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's an insult to God when people say the Bible is the inspired word of God, just as it's an insult to God when people say Jesus had to die for our sins or else we're in big trouble. What kind of God would be so foolish as to put something together as that whole book? And what kind of God would be so unloving as to need the sacrifice of his own child?
What God would give mankind 10 commandments and break them himself?
Well, that's another wonderful point, Rob. In fact, Jesus also says you don't need the 10 commandments. He says this in the Gospels, and he's ignored. The thing people don't think about is the fact that when Jesus walked the earth, for him to talk against the prevailing religion was an immediate death sentence.
Yeah.
So he had to stay alive long enough to be able to tell us what he came to tell us. Otherwise, why bother to go through this experience in a human body? And he was very clever in the way he did that. People know about the parables, but there are other things he did too, and you can see it if you carefully read the Bible. One thing he did was to give us pieces of the truth on different days because his followers would stay with him, but the temple guards who were watching and listening would change often, so they would never get the whole picture. Somebody asked him, you must have come to replace the law and the prophets. He said, or abolish the law and the prophets. He said, which was what they called our Old Testament. Mm-hmm. He said, I came not to abolish, I came to fulfill.
Yeah. Okay,
what does that mean? Another day, different guards. Someone said, teacher, what is the greatest commandment? Now he's thinking about the 10, right? And Jesus said there are two. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, mm-hmm. and love your neighbor as yourself. And then he said something important, Rob. He said,
I know what he said.
In that consists all the law and the prophets. So he took the whole of the Old Testament, he replaced it with the command that we love God and love one another. And he does it right in the Gospels.
But
everybody ignores that.
Didn't he also say, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you.
Perfect.
That
yes,
you
exactly
also love another.
Right.
And I believe that's John.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He says it a number of times in different ways. What he does in the Gospels is to replace the old religion. And I think he came to abolish the old religion, to tell you the truth, certainly not to start a new one. And again, you can see that in the Gospels as you read them. But what he intended to do was to take all of that legalism, all of the pain that those legalisms cause, and to replace them with the law of perfect love. This is not casual love. This is perfect love. Be thou perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect.
And even though you are a perfect guest, I must take a commercial break.
Oh, no.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Love talking to you, Roberta. And congratulations on a wonderful book, Liberating Jesus. Roberta's website is www.robertagrimes.com. We'll be back on the other side of this news break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Wilda Wiecka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we will weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Wilda Wiecka, and the Science of Magic right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Jesus came back now and insisted that we listen to him. How would the world be different if Christians really followed the Gospels? For 2,000 years, we've been practicing a religion. Now it's finally time to get it right. Read Liberating Jesus, new from Roberta Grimes. Meet the Jesus you never knew. Roberta uses afterlife evidence and biblical analysis to prove that Jesus is exactly right. Learning the lessons that he came to teach is the reason we are born at all. Roberta says he has come back now to insist that we actually listen to him so we can begin to use his teachings to unite and transform the world. Liberating Jesus wherever books are sold. Jesus has the answers, and it's not too late. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. began to demonstrate a metaphysical connection to the spirit world as a little girl. Her family noticed the connection, but it was a great-grandmother who told the family that Linnea was indeed gifted. The great-grandmother, who was also gifted, felt that Linnea had indeed inherited these attributes. It has been noticed that oftentimes such things are passed down through the generations. Linnea was also born with a caul, a thin white membrane across a newborn's face. Legend has it that if the baby is born with this caul, the child will have second sight, or what we call psychic abilities. Linnea Starr does past, present, and future, and has the gift of prophecy. It is written within scriptures that if you were able to give factual information and prophecies indeed come true, the gift indeed comes from the divine realm. Linnea Starr does large interactive groups as well as private gatherings. For more information on Linnea Starr or to contact Linnea for a one-on-one consultation, visit her website at www.linneastar.com. That's www.linneastar.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
I'm Rob McConnell, and welcome to the X-Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Today on the X-Zone, the Celtic after death. Many ancient European cultures believed that the human souls could transmigrate into animals, birds, and plants, as well as into other men and women. Celtic peoples held that the immortal soul passed from body to body for all eternity. Irish warriors had no fear of death, for they knew that if they were struck down in battle, it was only the end of one of their many lives. The Celts were so sure of living again that they would even lend money on the promise of assured repayment in a future life. Join me, Rob McConnell, for another story from the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology when next we meet in the X-Zone, the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard.
You're a pumpkin.
I was a pumpkin, a big orange pumpkin.
A big orange pumpkin. And were there a lot of children out there?
Not so much.
No? Did you get a lot of candy?
Yeah, I got a lot of candy. Mommy's eating all the chocolate bars.
Well, tell Mommy that's your candy, honey.
Okay.
Tell her.
Stop eating all my chocolate bars, Mommy. Daddy's sick.
I remember that Halloween night, and I also remember what I was told after Laura heard that clip. Too bad it's a family show. No, I said that wrong. I said I'm glad this is a family show. Maybe I'll do a next CD one day, and I'll include that conversation I had. X-Zone, my guest this hour is Roberta Grimes. She is the author of Liberating Jesus. Her website, www.robertagrimes.com. Roberta, when you're out speaking to people about your book, what are some of the questions that you constantly get?
Well, it's more statements than questions. Most people who have read the book don't have a lot of questions, which to me is kind of, I'm glad to hear, because I don't want to raise confusion. I want to try to settle it. most people that I hear from, and I get a lot of emails and talk to people and get their comments. Most people say things like, "Why didn't he say this stuff sooner?" Or "Why didn't you say this sooner?" Or what a couple of women have said, "Well, now I have my Bible. I'm just going to read this book." People have said that it opens their minds, opens their hearts, makes them see what's possible, that it's a great relief. Many people find Christianity raises fears in them, and some people have said that already they're not so afraid, and that I'd say most people have been very uplifted by it, but each in their own way, because each of them had their own needs. A few people have been horrified.
Really?
The people who are horrified tend to be people who are really invested emotionally in Christianity. They see the package if you take the package apart, it won't be what it is they love. And I understand and respect that, because I love Christianity. You would have no idea how many hymns I can sing.
Oh, I bet you and I could make a great duo. We could call ourselves Robert and Roberta, or Roberta and Robert, or the two Robbies. I don't know.
I don't know, but all I know is you better do the singing, because I don't sing so well.
Oh, well, wait a second. I'll play the guitar, okay? You can do the singing.
Christianity is a beautiful story.
It is. And it's a great way to live.
It is. But the thing about Christianity is as long as you're the right kind of Christian, you have a get out of hell free card. I mean, like all religions, Christianity sows in you a great fear, and that fear is of an angry God, hell, devil, but it gives you this card. And as long as you hold on to this card and you're the right kind of Christian, you don't have any worries. You go right to the head of the line. That was very comforting to me at one point, I have to tell you. Because when you got the fear sown in you, you need some way to comfort that fear. And that's how religions work. They sow in us a fear, and then they give us a way to address that fear and be free of it, as long as we stay in those pews.
Can you just see Jesus reading the Bible saying, "I never said that. That didn't happen."
What the heck are these people thinking?
What? Hey, Dad, did you see what they said about you?
Hey, Dad. I don't understand why he hasn't come back and just said, "Wait a minute, reset." But he hasn't, but I think he has now. It is not a coincidence that now we are able to understand the afterlife. Think about that. All that information that came over the first part of the 20th century didn't have to come over. No. God's in charge, but they gave us that information, and they gave us quantum physics, and they gave us quantum physics for dummies books so people who didn't ever even go beyond algebra 2 could understand it. And all these other scientific discoveries that come together for people who understand what they're doing and fit perfectly with the afterlife evidence. That's not a coincidence, Rob.
But
then think of what we have in the Gospels. Jesus spoke Aramaic. It was translated into Greek and then into English. If we take a modern English translation of the Gospels and compare it with the afterlife evidence, it matches perfectly. If we take a direct translation from Aramaic, it doesn't really match. That's not a coincidence. That's a miracle. That is a genuine gift from God.
But there's a wonderful side to Christianity. Without Jesus, we wouldn't have Christmas.
That's true.
And you know something? I believe that Christmas is the greatest miracle of all. Because as we get closer to December the 25th, hearts warm up. People are more giving. People are more loving. They start caring more and more about the people who don't have as much as they have. They start singing Christmas carols. I swear there's angels dancing all over the place.
Yes.
Can you just imagine if we could harness that?
And we can. Sweet, we can do that. All we have to do is live by the Gospels. You'll have that Christmas feeling every day of every year of everybody's life. The Gospels really work. Yeah. And I know that because I've tried them on me. And it makes a huge difference when you take the Gospels seriously and start living by them. My next book out in 2 years will be The Fun of Growing Forever, and I'm going to show exactly how that works. But the Gospels, the most amazing thing about all of this is that when I started taking it seriously, my life was transformed, and I was transformed.
Mm-hmm. I started taking it seriously at a very young age. I really did.
Really? You were good before I was good.
Oh, geez, I wouldn't go that far, hon. There was a time in my life when I wanted to become a member of the clergy. I wanted to help. I wanted to do nice. I wanted to spread the word. I wanted to get that Christmas feeling to everybody each and every day. But when I got booted out of the Anglican Church, I figured, what in the...
Yeah,
talk
sorry.
about revolt, a rebel. My Lord, I read the Bible every which way to Sunday many times, and I kept on challenging. I kept on asking questions. I was very defiant. But you know what I learned being so defiant? That the answers were right there in front of me.
Yes.
And like you have been saying, the message is there. And the message that most people read verbatim is not the true meaning.
No, the real miracle is that we have those teachings at all when you think about it, because it's so unlikely. It took people 30 years to begin to write those words down, and they were translated twice. It's a miracle that we can look at them now and, 2,000 years later and know what Jesus meant and understand how to make them work and actually live our lives that way. And it's a miracle that it works so well. I can't tell you. That's in the end why I've had to publish this book, because people need to know this stuff. We're in ignorance now. We need to understand the truth.
But I think like I was saying before, the book was written for one mindset. And unfortunately, throughout time, control was given over to the church, and the church used the Bible as its control factor. And the only way that you could really redeem yourself was by believing in the Word. You could only do that by going to church. And what happens when you go to church? They pass the pot around.
Yes.
Like, let's face it, religion is the number one business in the world.
Yes.
Sorry, Donald Trump, move over. Jesus has you beat here, buddy.
Yeah, but it's not Jesus. It's the people who are running a religion as if it were, you're so right, as if it were a business. Why is there so much wealth in the Vatican?
That's it, because it's very simple.
There's a single poor child in the world. Why is there so much wealth in the Vatican?
Bingo. You see, the way I look at it, the Vatican is the corporate headquarters of God Incorporated.
Oh, poor God, don't use his name that way.
You've got the Pope, who is the chairman of the board and CEO. You've got the College of Cardinals, who are the board of directors. And then you have everyone who goes to church and puts their money in the collection pot, the tithing in the collection pot, who are the shareholders. And those shareholders are banking on that when it's time to cash in their shares, they're going to go to heaven. And I agree with you that I can't understand why all this wealth sits within every church around the world, no matter what religion you are. If you have a church, man, sell it. Give the money to the poor, feed the hungry, clothe the people who don't have clothing. Make sure the kids go to school. Make sure everyone has a home to go to.
And teach the children the words of Jesus. I mean, I didn't understand the reason why we live until I had to learn it from the afterlife evidence, and I was such a zealous Christian. Jesus in the Gospels tells us we're here to grow spiritually. He tells us how to do it. And nobody ever, even though I read the Bible cover to cover, if you read the Bible in the middle of all those other books, you find the Gospels, you come to them, and then you go buy them, you don't get what's going on. You've got to read the Gospels by themselves.
I agree. Like I said, 2 different books, 2 different gods, 2 different theologies, 2 different philosophies. One is love, unconditional love, and that's the New Testament. The Old Testament is control, hate, and fear.
You're right. And I don't understand why, as I say, there have been a few people who have, very few, I'd say probably 3% of the people I've heard from have said, that's terrible. Oh, how terrible what you're doing. Well, one woman said, you must hate Christians and hate Jews. That's a terrible. You talk about love. Well, no, I emailed back and said, I wouldn't have written this book if I didn't love Christians and Jews so much. I could just say, too bad, so sad, you're wasting another lifetime. The Buddhists talk about it as turning on the wheel.
Yep.
Coming back again and again because you're not making any spiritual progress. We can't make spiritual progress in the afterlife, and that's why, yes, we do reincarnate, and Jesus talked about that too, except that the Council of Nicaea tried to remove all the references. They just didn't get them all to reincarnation. But if you want to make progress in this lifetime, I don't care what your religion is, the easiest and most certain way to do it is to follow the teachings of Jesus literally.
Tell me, have we come to a time in our growth as a society, as a human race, with the dogma that is attached to different names, Muslim, Jew, Christian, Catholic, Protestant? Is it time that we just dispel of those religions and all live as one race with one goal? Do we really need the wars that religion, fuels? For example, we've got the war with ISIS, Muslims against the rest of the world. This is nothing new. This war has been raging for hundreds of years.
Right.
So what would happen if there's no more Allah, there's no more God?
Well, there is a God, and that's the only God that's real, and that's the God that we've discovered by studying the afterlife. And that God has no religion attached to it. So, yes, that would be a miracle. Let's get rid of all the fake ones, and we can all congregate around in perfect love around the genuine God.
You know what? One of the 10 Commandments really gets me rolling in the aisles is where God says you shouldn't make any graven images.
Oh, my goodness, you're right.
Walk into any church, and what do you have? All these saints. What are you supposed to do? Pay to light a candle.
Right.
And then if you're a Catholic, your get-out-of-jail card is at your very disposal. All you have to do is go make a confession. 10 Hail Marys. Away you go. You're saved again.
And Jesus says you shall call no man father but your Father in heaven.
Right.
So what does the Catholic Church, to which I belonged for many years, insist that we call our clergyman?
Father.
Right. Why?
Mind you, I tried calling
this to a priest. Don't you read your Gospels? Why?
And
whenever I would ask a question, because I was a brat the way you were, I would be told it was another sacred mystery. That was his term.
And Jesus said, suffer little children to come unto me, for thine is the kingdom of heaven. He wasn't talking about going through the local priest first.
Oh, my goodness, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. And it isn't only Catholic clergymen who have done terrible things, but Protestant as well. And the more strict the denomination, the more abuse of children is going on.
My goodness.
Because they're so inhibited sexually. Sexuality is a perfectly normal part of human life. There is nothing whatsoever wrong about it, but that's another one of the horrible things we get out of the Old Testament, their demonization of normal living.
But look at what happens with the Church of Latter-day Saints, and all the criminal investigations are going on into that church because of child labor, because of sexual abuse, polygamy. Wow, that's an entire new different show on its own.
Plus, there are so many evils committed in the name of religions.
Yep.
I think it might be safe to say that most evils are to some extent committed in the name of religions.
Most wars are.
So they have nothing to do with God. Any religion. Jesus said, by their fruit will you recognize them. You can't tell them by their words, but you can tell them by their fruit. No good tree brings forth bad fruit, and no thorn bush brings forth good fruit.
I've got another one that fits in here perfectly. Never judge a book by the cover.
Right. If it says holy on it, doesn't mean it is holy.
However, if it does say Liberating Jesus by Roberta Grimes, it is a great book. I'm telling you, I am so happy with this book. And I have no hesitation whatsoever in telling my friends about your book. I have no hesitation about talking about your book on air, because I believe in my heart of hearts, my friend, that you are doing something wonderful.
Thank you, dear. I appreciate that so much. More than you know, because it's very hard. It's hard to stand up, especially when you're old, as I am, to stand up and say, wait a minute, the emperor doesn't have any clothes on. And the emperor doesn't. And it's time for us to free ourselves and to follow the truth. Jesus says you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And then he gives us the truth in the Gospels. And if we're Christians, we already have it in our hands, and yet we ignore it. We ignore it. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It literally can save the world, Rob. If everyone follows these teachings, it will save the world.
Well, this is what we're going to do, because you know what? You're not alone. Okay? You're not alone. You have me, you have the Exo Nation, you have all these people who are going to be getting this book in their hands very shortly. Look, all the stores that are carrying your books, they wouldn't be carrying your books if they didn't think the book had value and people wouldn't buy the book. Shelf space is too important to retailers. But
that's what is most amazing to me, Rob. Every major chain in the United States has bought this book in volume. Yeah. And I'm nobody. They don't do that except people who've had bestsellers.
You're wrong. You're wrong.
That's a miracle.
Okay, let's use the miracle. But you are somebody. You are someone who had the vision, who had the inspiration, who knew what they were talking about, and put it into a book format that people can read, and they too can get the inspiration, the knowledge, the wisdom, and the better path to go on just by buying your book. So you are someone. You are Roberta Grimes, the author of Liberating Jesus.
Thank you, dear. You make me feel so good whenever I talk to you, I must say.
I'm just telling the truth. I'm just telling the truth.
Well, together, we can, all of us together, everyone listening, we have the power to transform the world and to create heaven on earth. And now it's time to begin.
I agree with you, and I am glad to be standing up there with you. And if anybody wants to argue with me, I'm 6'5". I weigh 255 pounds, and I will defend anyone. You know, I had a dream years ago, and I haven't shared this with many people. I dreamt I heard of. Now you're going to think this is strange, and so many members of the Exo Nation, but this is the truth. I dreamt I met Jesus. And he said, "Your tongue is my sword, your heart is my shield."
Wow. Wow. That's wonderful.
I've never told that on air before.
That's wonderful. What a beautiful thing that is.
And I often think of those words.
Yes, I would too.
And I say, why me? Like, I'm the guy that got kicked out of church.
I know, but that's because church wasn't where a truly spiritual person belonged. What a wonderful story, Rob. I'm so glad you told us that.
Well, I would like to say more, but you and I have to say so long for now. You're going to be back on in a month or at least 6 weeks, because we have to tell everybody where to get your book and promote it for our Christmas store.
Thank you, dear.
Listen, let our listeners know how they can get a copy of Liberating Jesus by this great author by the name of Roberta Grimes.
Well, right now it's available on Amazon. You can come to my website, robertagrimes.com, and go through there, or just directly to Amazon. However, by the end of November, it's going to be in Barnes & Noble, Costco, Target, Books A Million, airport stores, and by January it'll be in every single major chain in the United States and I think in Canada. And now it's being sold internationally, believe it or not. By January, February, it'll be in international stores.
Once again, Roberta, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much for writing Liberating Jesus. And thank you for being my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. I treasure our friendship.
As I do mine.
Sending you love.
Take care, dear. Exo Nation, my guest this hour has been Roberta Grimes. The name of the book, Liberating Jesus. That's right. You hear the commercial at least 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a night here on the X Zone. That's because I believe Roberta and I will be back together in the weeks and months to come. Her book is going to be available through our X-Zone Book Club. And I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue here in the X-Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. Don't go away.